Well, welcome to What the Franklin. I'm Chip Franklin. That is Nikki Medoro.
Hello.
Longtime partner at KGO Radio, and always great to see you again, Nikki.
Good to see you as well, my friend.
We're going to talk about stuff that we don't necessarily want to talk about in today's show. Should Trump go to jail? What will that do to the fall? I don't know, because there's a new poll out showing that his support has tripled in some GOP circles since April. I don't know if that's true, because I've also seen conflicting polls along those lines. We're going to talk about Hunter Biden. And again, the ridiculous attack. And again, you said this to me earlier before the show. Everybody's had somebody in their life that's been addicted to drugs. And, one of my closest friends I grew up with was, he's been clean for 35 years.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And it's one of those things that I'm so impressed with Biden standing by him.
Of course.
I mean, you say of course, but I that doesn't happen all the time. And then Caitlin Clark. That whole story, which I find fascinating. All right, but first, if everybody remembers, Facebook and their role in the 2016 election. I had this in my head and I come pulling out now.
With the Cambridge Analytica.
Cambridge Analytica. Thank you.
Yeah.
You read my mind. That's scary. And but it's much deeper and much more ominous than that. And what's happened in the last 5 years, when we were at KGO together, there was a woman that contacted me who was worked for Facebook, and her job was to go through and look at these pages and the horrible stuff that she had to look at, child porn, all this crazy. And there was a huge PTSD, following out of that. And so that to me is really important that we don't talk about enough. Unfortunately, there are people out there who have made it their mission to educate not just America, but the world, is to the dangers of social media. And look, there's a lot of great things about the internet and social media, but it doesn't mean you ignore these, especially at your own peril. Katie Paul is director of Tech Transparency Project. That's also techtransparencyproject.org. And she's nice enough to join us here on What the Franklin. Katie, first of all, let's start off by saying thank you and great work. But I know it's just a fraction of what needs to be done, right?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. And it really is a fraction and increasingly an uphill battle, because we are dealing with some of the most powerful technology companies on the planet who really don't have much will to address these harms, at least not in the present day.
Why? Is there too much money involved?
As the root of, all things, it's really, there's a lot of money involved. I mean, we're talking about companies that their quarterly profits are billions of dollars, and there's really a wild west of regulation. Think EPA, or think pollution before the EPA, and we're dealing with the digital and sociocultural version of that. There's no backlash for these companies legally or policy-wise or regulatory, or even fines that are significant enough to actually harm their business. So there's no incentive for them to invest in addressing, the things that you've talked about that some of these people look at: child pornography, extremism, and the development of those harms on the platform.
Katie, it also seems that the people that should be regulating these companies, a la Congress, the committees, as infamously was seen when Mark Zuckerberg was before the committee, they didn't even understand how Facebook makes money. If you don't even understand how these platforms make money, how can you regulate them? Is there a bit of, I'm going to be nice and say, learning curve between some of these tech companies and Congress, who should be, coming down a little bit harder on these companies?
There certainly is. And then I know exactly what moment you're talking about, where Mark Zuckerberg replied, "Senator, we run ads."
Exactly.
That hearing, I believe, was
to be fair, it was Orrin Hatch, and he's 140. Okay.
But it doesn't matter, because he's on that committee, to say, oh, well, he's old. Well, then don't be on the committee. That's my point.
Yeah.
I get what you're saying. And I believe in that same hearing, one senator asked Sundar Pichai, the CEO of Google, why he was having problems with his iPhone. And Mr. Pichai had to nicely explain that was a different company. But, I think, having watched a lot of the congressional hearings on big tech, they've come a very long way since 2018 in understanding the power of the platform, understanding the business model, and hiring the staffers who have the chops to understand that can help, prep these senators. And amazingly, we've seen really, especially in the contemporary era, historic bipartisan support for these kind of issues with regard to regulating tech. It's one of the very few, if not the only issue in Congress right now where there's bipartisan support. You see, Marsha Blackburn and Senator Blumenthal really coordinating together for these hearings to address the same harms. There's something we haven't really seen, I feel like, since the late 90s in terms of genuine bipartisan effort. The problem is that that effort is there, but the will to pass a bill is not. And the U.S. is continually falling behind, in part because we're seeing these multi-billion-dollar companies pour a ton of money into lobbying. And it's far more than we saw from big tobacco or big oil lobbying things like the EPA or health regulations. And now we're seeing the technology equivalent of that. And unfortunately, while we're still trying to catch up with the social media part, we now are seeing generative AI come from these companies. Again, a wild west. We still haven't dealt with the regulation for social media, and Congress is already trying to move forward. And these companies are already writing the laws themselves on essentially how this technology will be regulated, technology that benefits them.
Of course, and there's always the conservative Republican, and I understand this to a certain extent, that worries about regulation, and that much of the regulation in the past, not necessarily in this field, is reactionary, right, and not well thought out. But this is one of these moments where, Facebook went from the thing where you could post pictures of your vacation to internet Russian agency stoking fear and angst and violence among groups. Where was the jump there? What was the tipping point?
Really, I think the tipping point was not just the IRA's involvement in Facebook and, kind of taking over from the platform where we share pictures of our cats. Speaking of which, my cat is really interested in being on camera. I'm trying to keep him at bay at the moment.
Okay.
He's a fan of social media.
Go.
But Facebook's cover up of that foreign interference, especially when it was so blatant, the fact that the IRA was buying political ads for the United States in rubles, something that would be quite literally impossible to do on, any media outlet.
But hold on a second. I didn't know that. So they were really paying in rubles?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. And this is why, Facebook now has the ad library and these efforts. I mean, the Senate really did deep investigation on that issue, but that was, 2015, 2016. We're talking about right at that time, Facebook was absolutely exploding its international reach, and particularly in communities and developing countries where there's not a lot of digital literacy, and it's much easier to manipulate certain factions of the population. And what Russia did was essentially take that model and just apply it to the US, because again, there's nobody watching, there's no regulation, and the companies aren't putting any effort to address these issues. For instance, one of the things that Tech Transparency Project recently did a report on, and we're talking, it's now been almost a decade since the Cambridge Analytica scandal, since Cambridge Analytica was actually engaging in it. We learned about it a couple years later, but it's been almost a decade, and there are still foreign interference issues that are blatant on the platform. For instance, looking at India's election, which just finished and was the most participated in election in history. That election, which is significant, and Modi has quite a grip on the control there, and quite a relationship with Mark Zuckerberg as well. There was a black market on Facebook for ad accounts approved to run political ads specifically in India. Facebook's whole thing is you have to have this special approval process now and prove that you're a resident of the country you're trying to run ads in. But these guys will use fake IDs or stolen identification, get political advertising accounts for a specific country, and then sell them to foreign actors. So we found users in Pakistan selling political ad-approved accounts for India. The black market for that is on Facebook. So Facebook's just enabling a black market that they ultimately profit from because it's ad accounts. You have to run ads. And I think
what percentage of their profits do you think, Katie, come from these sort of nefarious sort of ventures?
Well, that's the thing. It's very opaque in terms of understanding exactly what's on the platform. And, to the point earlier about Congress, not really being of the generation of social media are being able to catch up to this, one of the things that we see is the tech companies in their lobbying and even in their responses to Congress really take advantage of that. Oh, it's just too technical. It's very complicated,
Right.
Senator. It's very complicated. You wouldn't be able to understand. Well, oh, we're at such a major scale, or we get so many pieces of content that it's impossible for us to track or keep up with all of them, which some would argue is, a reason they are monopolies and therefore should be broken up. That's a different discussion. But I think that, they really take advantage of the lack of technical knowledge. And that's why we try to really bring the public a seat at the table in these issues. Yes, none of us are, tech user experience engineers, but we do know that the solutions for these problems exist. They're out there. They've been written about many times over. Facebook Files, which was the whistleblower Frances Haugen's leak of documents from inside the company, showed that ahead of the 2020 election, Facebook ran its own investigations and was well aware that its algorithm was actually radicalizing people.
Right.
And there was a solution to that. And the, trust and safety team presented that solution, and it was shot down because it would hurt the business model. And that is the root of the overall problem. And we keep getting into this cycle. The companies will pat themselves on the back and say, oh, but we created a policy. This isn't allowed on our platform. But a policy is only as good as its enforcement. And
Right.
if the policy is just on paper and it's not effectively being enforced, it's just a PR move. It's not actually something that's going to move the needle on making people safer online or stopping interference in elections.
Well, Katie, what about Section 230? Kind of giving these companies cover. Like, oh, I'm sorry, it's just like television. I can't control everything that's put on this platform. Would that solve it? And just to kind of go along with it, Facebook removed news from its platform as an option. Of course, you could still share news articles, but they don't have a news button.
Mhm.
Is removing politics the same way? They are obviously able to do stuff like that.
Define politics.
Well, I mean, any political ads. You can't have any political ads.
Okay.
Well, political ads, whether you're in the US or India or really anywhere in the world, are a huge faction of their revenue. We don't know how
By
much.
the way, didn't the Supreme Court rule that that's free speech, right? I mean, in essence, a political ad, a donation to it's part of speech. It's protected under the First Amendment.
Well, sure, that can be protected under the First Amendment, but Facebook, YouTube, these are private companies. They're not the government. They're not going to be violating the First Amendment if they enforce policies that are relevant to their platform.
Well, they enforced it in radio. We were forced to play political people. They paid top dollar for them, but we had to. If somebody wanted to put a political ad, we had to take their money and find it. Unless we just didn't have the inventory. But if we had the inventory, we had to take their political ads. So at least I don't know if it's an FCC thing or what, but I mean, I do know that it'd be great to have publicly financed campaigns and limit all that, but that's not going to happen. That horse is so far out of the barn, right? I mean,
Exactly.
Well, I think there's also the issue of, it's not about necessarily the political ads, but also the ad review and the overview of ads. You're not going to be able to run an ad on, CNN or MSNBC that is blatant misinformation, libel, something like that. Certainly there's mudslinging that happens, but nothing to the scale of the kind of harm and misinformation and calls to violence that we see in ads on Facebook. And I think that that's where the difference is. Now, the FEC has kind of gone hands off with social media. It's not their circus. They don't want to deal with it. But this is increasingly the most important venue for political campaigning. And so it's really difficult. Now, Section 230 is, Nikki, I'm so glad you brought that up. It's a very interesting point. I think for context, people need to understand that Section 230 was first introduced, almost 30 years ago. It became law 30 years ago, back in 1996. And for anyone who was around in 1996, we're talking about dial-up internet. And the platforms as we know them today, many of them didn't exist. In fact, Google's search didn't even launch until 2 years after Section 230 was passed. So what was the point of Section 230 if not to regulate social media? It was a telecommunications bill, and it was essentially saying, for small tech startups like eBay, they were just platforms, and they said to Congress, hey, we're small startups, American innovation, and if you hold us responsible because somebody posts child pornography on our platform or somebody tries to sell drugs through it, that's not our fault. We didn't do that. We're just a host. And so basically Section 230, and now it's often referred to as the 26 words that created the internet, it says that anything posted by a third party on a platform or a service like this, the platforms are not responsible. So if you post, a terrorist video on Facebook, Facebook's not going to get in trouble for promoting terrorist content because they didn't put that content there. They were not the publisher. And so Section 230 just gives them a free liability.
Oops.
Oh, we lost her.
That was the internet. There you go.
Yeah, that's Facebook. And
Facebook just stepped in and
the internet is like, and you're done. But yeah, I mean, the point that she's making is it just gives, which, and the last thing that she said, Chip, about, Facebook didn't publish it. Yes, you damn well did. Like, we can talk about the nuance of that Section 230, but the truth of the matter is, if Facebook allowed it for people to be seen on their platform. Section 230.
Yeah, but I mean, obviously,
immediately.
there are probably, I'm going to guess 500 million things posted a day. And
then you're falling into the whole, it's too big. It's too many.
No, but that's what I was going to get to. AI and AI on steroids, which is what we're going to have. Could be tomorrow. I mean, it's growing and it's becoming more powerful. AI will be able to do that. We got Katie back here. Katie.
Okay, perfect.
Basically, Mark Zuckerberg just kicked your ass.
I know the internet's like, stop talking, Katie.
Yeah.
We don't want
I was saying too much. Yeah, they really shut me down there.
The 230 had in essence, it was there to try to help the fledgling internet, and it created Frankenstein. It's Mary Shelley, and kind of in reverse.
Is there a way of pulling back though, Katie? I mean, what you were basically saying was it does give these businesses like Facebook, YouTube, all those, kind of an excuse. Oh, well, it's too big. Too many people are posting. I can't possibly monitor it all. Are they right?
And they're right in the sense that they don't have enough people on their teams currently to effectively address that. Now they could. They have the technical capabilities.
Didn't they just fire
the finances? They fired thousands of people, and Google also lost their privacy chief yesterday. Facebook's laid off thousands of moderators during one of the biggest global election seasons. We're far from the days where in 2020, Facebook launched their elections war room to look like they're really, addressing election interference. That was all a show. It's been clear now in the 4 years since that regulation wasn't happening. So they don't bother with that. In fact, they just lay off many of the teams that are meant to address that. Again, because there are no repercussions. Now, there have been efforts to pull this back. So if you've ever heard of FOSTA SESTA, it's a bill that was signed into law in 2019, and tech companies really lobbied hard against it. But it's essentially saying that when it comes to sex trafficking, the platforms can be held liable for knowingly facilitating sex trafficking. This was part of the Backpage.com case, and there is a lawsuit from a Jane Doe against Facebook where she was, as a minor, trafficked through Facebook and through Facebook messages. Now, Facebook is fighting tooth and nail. That lawsuit's in Texas. They've been fighting tooth and nail to keep that from going to court, because that could be the first roll down the hill of a lot of liability issues for these platforms.
Good.
Now, the big question has been, for people like me that focus on other crimes, I look at everything from the trafficking of blood antiquities to drugs on these platforms. How is it just that one bad crime is a carve out? Why shouldn't any crimes of that nature facilitated through the platforms be carved out? And
if they could do it for one, why can't they do it for all? Right?
Exactly. And actually, just about 2 or 3 weeks ago, there was a hearing about the potential of sunsetting 230, a bipartisan hearing, and the potential of that. Now, there's certainly an important need for 230 so that platforms can operate with some level of autonomy. But we know now that they have the finances, the technical ability, and we know the experts out there exist to actually address these kind of really harmful, damaging networks on the platforms. And at this point, it is a choice not to do so, and not a matter of ability.
So you're saying it's time to get rid of the carrot and bring out the stick?
Essentially, yeah. I mean, at least when it comes to social media platforms, we're no longer in the era of 1990s, in your Silicon Valley garage innovation and startups. America's got the edge when it comes to these platforms. These companies are huge. Algorithms, as we know them now, just simply did not exist at the time that legislation was written. And we need the law to catch up with technology. And even as states have tried to take some of these issues on their own, in lieu of any effort from the federal government, the companies are lobbying hard at the state level, and in many cases they're more effective because you're dealing with even less resourced offices who are relying on any kind of information or influence that they get to inform what their decisions are. And that is one of the other concerns we've seen. In fact, Vermont just passed, and it's going to the governor's desk soon, one of the strongest data privacy bills in the country, including a kids privacy protection bill. The tech companies lobbied so hard against this in a state like Vermont that one of their state reps actually just wrote an op-ed about how hard that they were lobbied and all of the kind of tricks that tech was using with these third-party entities to try to sway opinion when it came to this particular bill. And we still have to wait and see if they've gotten to the governor, if he'll veto it or not. But the fact that they're putting that kind of effort in, even at the state level, just shows how valuable the lack of regulation has been to them. And of course, as I said earlier, with like the EPA, for instance, of course, companies didn't want to have to clean up the toxic waste they were dumping out back, or the lead in the paint. It's expensive to put in effort to do those things. But, profit over people, right? Screw everybody else unless the government makes you do something else. And that's the world that we're seeing with regard to tech right now.
So yeah, the stick, basically.
Yeah, beat them.
Yeah.
Beat them.
I guess a couple things that I always ask people, I go, who still pays for porn? I mean, I only bring that up because it's become so ubiquitous, your internet experience,
internet,
right?
And then there was porn, right? So
and obviously it's, that whole industry has changed from boogie nights into where it is today. But I also think that in some ways, we can learn from that. We can learn that that we've gotten better about educating kids and parents, and now we're hearing more and more psychological studies of the damage caused by that kind of exposure at a certain age. I'm hoping that AI and all the, if everybody from Bill Gates to Hawking to, every wise guy in the world has said this is really frightening, but it also has potential maybe to deal with the issues we're talking about right now, done properly. And I think it will be done properly, and it will be done improperly, as everything goes, right? And I guess as we keep a closer eye on this, is there something we should be watching in AI that would give us that tipping point that I mentioned before with the internet? The internet, I remember, I think the two pivotal points for me was when the Drudge dress story, when Newsweek would not publish that, and Drudge did. That changed everything. But I also remember the first when Diana died, Princess Diana, I came home and turned my computer on, and I learned it by then because it was in between news cycles, right? My wife and I had been out to dinner. It was like at 11:30 at night. So the tremendous opportunity to get information from here. We just have to teach adults and children to be more discerning, to ask questions, to be more Socratic in our approach to news and everything else. And that word Socratic is really important, but I don't think we're teaching that right now. And that's almost a whole new thing, is how do you teach people to find the truth?
I think that knowledge is the best disinfectant, and you are completely right. We deal with a lot of people. Obviously, there's a lot of focus on concerns with kids right now and harm to children. What Instagram and all the filters do to a young girl's mental health and appearance, what the algorithmic extremism does to young boys. And we saw the Buffalo shooter was 18 years old, and he talked about the fact that he was radicalized on the internet. And information, kids are smart. I am what's considered an elder millennial. So I remember the world before social media, before AOL Instant Messenger, and I've grown up in the world after that. And kids now all of this, some of them, their entire lives are on Instagram. If their parents started posting since they were a baby, they understand a lot more about these platforms than we ever will. That's why I always think it's kind of funny with the parental controls these companies try to do to put the responsibility on parents, as if the kids aren't light years ahead of them.
Oh yeah,
and getting around that.
I'm in the middle of that. Yes.
Yeah, but I think, information is the most important, and explaining to kids that, explaining what algorithms are. You don't have to be a technical expert, but just say, these machines are really powerful. And if you click on a photo of a skinny woman, it might keep showing you more photos of increasingly skinny women because it thinks that's what you like. And that's how the company makes money. It's not a reflection of you or what you should look like.
Right.
And remember, what you see isn't the real world. And I think instilling that young in kids, they understand. And in some kids, there's even been a backlash. It's not cool to be on social media anymore and broadcast your life. And I think that just making sure kids have the tools, and in some cases, it's the adults who aren't digitally literate and have no plans to try to be, that we really need to worry about. And, that's what we saw with January 6th. We even see the remorse now from some of the January 6th people who were convicted saying, I was caught up in the moment. I really believed this based on what I saw online. I now know this was wrong, because at the time they didn't realize that their Facebook feed wasn't what everybody was seeing.
Exactly.
They thought that was what the situation was, and we were all just being duped.
Well, we're working on a documentary on Ashley Babbitt, and just the story around her, which is heartbreakingly sad. I mean, that how she was turned in a matter of months from a person that didn't have a lot of experience with politics into the person that ended up getting shot trying to invade into the Capitol. Algorithms. I would love to take a whole show and just talk about that. I always tell people algorithms are like. It's like the Jewish grandmother trying to get two people together. Oh, you like the movies? He loves the movies. You like the swim? He loves to swim. And that's in a pure, basic way. That's great. I love that when Amazon can tell me I'm going to like this, or I'm going to like this movie, or Rotten Tomatoes can tell me if I like this, I'm going to like that. Problem is that if they're not honest with me, and it leads me down a darker path, then that's the problem. And that's, of course, what we're facing. You do a tremendous job, Katie, and we really appreciate your time.
Thank you,
I know
Katie.
it's valuable. Again, it's called the techtransparencyproject.org, and we're going to get you back again. Thank you so much. Be safe.
Thanks so much.
Thank
Have a great
you.
day.
Again, Katie Paul, it's to me, it fascinates me to see young people that, we joke about Orrin Hatch and the members of Congress that have no idea, but, I mean, your guys are going to be the ones that are going to, your kids, teenagers now, they're going to spend their whole lives with this. It's going to be so, I use the word ubiquitous too much, which is ironic, I guess, but that it's part of their life now. They can't even imagine the world without the internet.
Oh, no. Well, I mean, it's like imagining the world without a refrigerator, right? It's like, well, what do you mean there was a world without a refrigerator? But I will say, Katie was right. My daughter, she's 15 years old. And a lot of her schooling, a lot of her friends are on Instagram, for instance. She does not want to be on Instagram. You know what I mean? She's like, no, I don't want to be it. I see my friends, not that she's not on any other social media. I'm not trying to put a halo over her head, but I do hope that there will be this, I'm so tired with sharing everything. And, as far as the algorithm, you and her, so right. There's no problem if you're just feeding me movie reviews. But then again, it's what are you not showing me? And that was the problem with January 6th, is they were only being fed this lie, and everywhere they went kept feeding them the same lie.
Well, COVID was a great example of that.
Yeah.
And you and I were doing a show in the middle of all that, and seeing how misinformation. I still hear it today. Of course, in this happened the other day that I did this the other day with the show with Tom Arnold about the worst person in the world not named Trump, and it's this one.
Have you guys been following 4chan?
Here's what I wanted to show you. Hold on.
Do you think that's appropriate? Do the American people deserve to be abused like that, Mr. Fauci? Because you're not doctor. You're Mr. Fauci in my few minutes. No, I don't need your answer. I want to talk about this right here.
Mr. Chairman,
Objection.
Objection.
I reclaim my time. Mr. Raskin.
Gentlelady will suspend.
Mr. Chairman,
Point of order.
just in terms of the rules of decorum, are we allowed to deny that a doctor is a doctor just because we don't want him to be a doctor?
Yes, because in my time, that man does not deserve to have a license.
That was
I
Jamie.
cannot stand her.
Yeah,
I
I
mean,
know.
she is the epitome of what is wrong with politics.
Yeah,
She is
Jimmy
the epitome of
Raskin
it.
is actually the opposite. He is the
Exactly,
yeah, yeah.
exactly. Ugh.
But I think that, again, she deals in, you heard the first part, which actually was appropriate in a way, because she was talking about Q and 4chan and all these, all this.
Well, and
this
she's been radicalized.
right. Yeah,
I
she
mean,
was
she
radicalized.
herself has been.
Right.
So,
And that explains a little bit of her lunacy,
yeah.
I mean, I'll say this, that, you compare her, people compare her and Lauren Boebert. As much as I disagree with Lauren Boebert's rooted in the real world. She's just she's a political animal is what she is. And she'll do and say anything to move forward. Dairy Queen, on the other hand, is insane. She's lost her mind.
She is.
And, we're just beginning, we're seeing this now. And then, I don't know if you saw the story. Tom was talking about this. Tom Arnold, when he was on The Apprentice, he's known Trump for 40 years, witnessed Trump saying the N-word.
Of course.
And it's on tape apparently now. Mark Anderson, is that his name? I forget the name of the producer, Anderson, the producer of
I don't remember his name.
of The Apprentice. Anyway, he says he has a tape on that. And we remember when Trump said that he thought black people would like him because of his mugshot. And, just again, this whole the things he says are so clueless and so out of touch, but not for his base.
Not for his base. It's a dog whistle.
Fox.
It's a dog whistle.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. It's just ridiculous.
Here's that Jesse Waters guy.
Ugh.
Tell me, listen to this. This might be the one of the most racist things I've heard, but it's couched in such a way. Like I said before, these guys are good.
This might seem like an open and shut case, but Jonathan Turley points out Hunter's legal team might have an ace up their sleeve. It's called jury nullification. It's when you pick a jury that will give you a not guilty verdict. They know you're guilty, but they just disagree with the law. The strategy plays on the racial makeup of the jury, which is mostly black, as well as the Biden's influence in Delaware. The hope is this jury won't convict for a drug-related crime.
First of all, that's not why jury nullification happens.
Both sides, by the way, have the option of not having certain people on the jury. You pick a jury that you think is going to be sympathetic to your client. That is an obvious thing. He's an asshat.
And Trump's jury had 2 Republicans on it, hardcore. True Social.
They still found him guilty.
Yeah, and and New Yorkers, by the way, and I've said this many times, New Yorkers, they will put this in front of politics any day.
Right.
And if Trump did get convicted because of bias, it's because he's an asshole. It's not because he's a Republican. It's because they know him in New York. They've seen him in New York for half.
He was guilty. I mean, for people to be like, oh, he signed the freaking.
Well, no, he
check.
was guilty. That's not a fact. That's not an opinion. That's a fact.
So it's not that they convicted him because he's an a-hole. They convicted him because he's guilty. That's why.
Yeah. And so, we find ourselves now looking at July 11th and asking what we should do. And should Trump be imprisoned, or at the very least home confinement?
I'm not going to get that either.
Well, let me ask you this: how could it actually? I just saw this on Mediaite. I'm looking at it right now, and it says there's a new poll that says it's stunning poll. GOP support for convicted felon as president has tripled since April. Now, I'm going to make sure this is Rasmussen. It's a YouGov. It's a political poll.
Yeah, but a lot of people do think that they support the jury's decision and the conviction. And
Right. Yeah.
No one within the GOP is going to not side with Trump. That's the problem with the GOP, is they don't have a backbone. They put party before country every single time. There's a handful that don't, Kinzinger and others, but they will bend the knee. Look at Nikki Haley. Look at all of them. Now, speaking of Nikki Haley, her voters is what's going to freak Trump out. Are they going to go to Trump? Are they going to go to Biden, or are they not going to vote for anyone?
She's going to be the VP candidate. I really believe she's going to be. She's a dark horse for that. I mean, are you going to put? Look, if he really wants to win, Tim Scott's not going to help him.
No,
no, right, and neither will DeSantis. Okay.
No.
But Nikki Haley would help.
Nikki Haley could. Yeah.
And that's what worries me.
It's not going to be the dog shooter. You know what I mean? So
no. Yeah.
And then it's going to be a woman. It's not going to be Carrie Lake because she's wackadoo. And she doesn't help him,
Kristi Noem, Carrie Lake, the only person that, seems to have, I'll be honest with you, if the vice president actually had any sort of control over the president, I would say, get Nikki Haley in there in case he wins, but she won't. You know, I
No,
mean,
she has no.
and if you
she has
haven't
no moral
learned from,
code.
from how he treated Mike Pence at the end, essentially, throwing the wolves at him, right? Then,
Right.
but
Well, and then Nikki Haley, I'm sorry, just taking her as just a candidate, when she actually stood in front of a microphone and said that transgender women in sports was the women's issue of our generation after Roe v. Wade got
I know,
overturned,
right?
she
Yeah,
lost all credibility for me. I'm like, are you insane?
I'm
But,
great.
she's an
Yeah, I'm
idiot.
glad you
So.
brought that up because, I mean, do you still think that the Dobbs case is still going to resonate in this fall? I mean,
Yes,
okay,
absolutely. I think that
right.
what's happening in states like Texas, I think that as women are seeing the repercussions of the restrictions on what they can do, that's why it might not get the headlines that it did right when Dobbs was overturned. But as a woman, I mean, I still have that conversation with both my daughter and my son. I was like, when you guys go to college, you can go anywhere as long as the rights that you have there are the same rights that you have in
Okay.
this state.
So answer the question first about July 11th.
Mm,
Probation, house
nothing.
arrest, incarceration,
Probation.
Okay. And do
He
you
has
think
no
somebody?
criminal history. You know what I mean? He has no criminal.
Okay,
Well, that's been
yeah,
proven.
right. But as long as it's done because for the right reason. In other words, an
Sentencing.
average person in that role
Yeah,
probably wouldn't get prison. But
exactly.
34 counts, guilty. I don't know. I mean, I think,
No,
yeah, I think that normally I don't want him to go to jail right now.
you won't.
I just want to beat him in the fall. And if he does go to jail, it's going to be for a short period of time, and he'll run. It's just
He's gonna be so scared if they put his butt even in, obviously he'd be by himself. It's not like he's gonna be with everybody else. But just having to put on that jumpsuit, he's a germaphobe. He doesn't want
plus
to go anywhere,
he won't have his hairspray and he won't have his tanning stuff.
Yeah, that's just make it last long enough that he loses his tan. That'd be hilarious.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the part of it. I call him skin tag. And he really does remind me of a skin tag. Everything about him. This latest video that he did, this compilation of these political ads, he doesn't look good. It's what else Tom Arnold told me is that he was on Ozempic. He's lost weight through Ozempic. You can see it. He's lost some weight.
He still looks like a blob to me.
Oh, he's disgusting. But I mean, all right. So Hunter Biden, and this we talked about this at the start of the show. I'm very impressed. Joe Biden supported his son.
Yes.
And this case is on. He checked a box on an application to purchase a weapon.
Yeah.
That said he was not using drugs.
He lied.
Yeah, he lied. And that's not a jailable offense in my opinion. He didn't get the gun. He didn't commit a crime with the gun. But again, whatever it is, whatever they have to deal with, they'll deal with.
Exactly. I mean, if he did it, just like with Trump, if the sentencing calls for a certain punishment, there is leeway and the judge can decide fine. But Hunter Biden is not Joe Biden. And I was saying this earlier on my show, parents or relatives, shut up. Parents and relatives that know somebody or have been touched by drug addiction know very well, God, you cannot have everybody, taking the fall for what their drug addict relative does. That's going to be the sympathetic jury, not the racial makeup of it or anything like that. It's going to be the fact that people have experience with this. Your cousin or your brother or your parent who had a drug addiction and what they did. Now, if you had to be held responsible for that nonsense, no way. And so that's what I think is really going to play into this jury is, are you going to send this drug addict away for simply lying, which is what drug addicts do. So it's like, I don't know. They do anything to get what they want. And he's going to be humiliated by the images and the videos. And that is another thing that people can relate to. God, I got this video, or, oh my God, my cousin showed up drunk or high at this family reunion. Everybody has experience, not everybody, but a lot of people have that experience. And that is what I think is going to play to the jury.
We have a friend of ours who just broke up. And he's an alcoholic, and he just keeps getting back on it, and it's heartbreaking, I mean, he goes on Facebook with his guitar and just sings these songs, and it's just, and I think that you're right. I think most people can empathize with that. I also believe, though, that, and this is what Karl Rove said right before the conviction, that Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania are all so close. And that this has to play in Biden's favor, these convictions and the more and more evidence that we see that Trump has committed these crimes. I mean, we know, I don't understand really why we aren't moving forward in Georgia, because Cannon can't stop that, right? She's stopping the documents case in Florida. I'd like to see the Georgia case move forward, and obviously we'd have to do it soon because we're 5 months away from the election. But
Yeah,
I mean, we
they're
have
going to
them on-
delay. I mean, Trump has the money and the power to delay everything.
Yeah.
So,
and then there's a story, the back to the Dobbs case and the overturning Roe v. Wade, where Trump has on tapes and many times he takes credit for.
oh yeah,
We got Clarence Thomas and Alito, both who have said that they would favor looking at legislation that would ban contraception, which in my mind, we're going into an area here where, states like California will just say "F you."
well.
No, seriously, we're going to do what we want to do. I mean, it's not going
Well,
to be.
that's what we try to do when we enshrine things in our own constitution. But again, state law, federal law trumps state law. So
I understand that. I understand, but I think you're going to see at some point. I mean, if I were the Democrats, my plan right now would be to try to get 67 votes in the Senate and a majority in the House and change the composition of the Supreme Court. Not to make it Democratic, more Democratic than Republican, but to actually make it more Democratic in general. I don't know what the magic number is, but I think minimum of 13.
I'd rather have term limits. I mean, starting
Now
there.
that's in the Constitution, though, so that's going to be hard. But you can, under law, you can move, you can add. You don't need to change the Constitution to add members to the Supreme Court. You can also, and I've heard yes and no on this, but I think yes is the right answer. You can pass a law that these judges on the Supreme Court are only promised a lifetime as a federal judge, not a lifetime on the Supreme Court. It doesn't say that anywhere.
Exactly.
So you could rotate them, rotate in and out. Bottom line is that obviously, it's ironic that all the noise we made about Gorsuch, Barrett, and Kavanaugh, it's these two guys, that actually participated to some degree in January 6th, either by flying an upside down flag, or Ginny Thomas, the wife of Clarence Thomas, was at January 6th. She was there and messaging Mark Meadows to save the country and to keep Trump in power. So obviously, in a normal world, they both would recuse themselves from this, but they're not.
But they don't want to. They have no soul.
Last thing here, again, and so no jail. I don't think the GOP support is what it appears to be.
I don't either.
I think it's peeling away. I think
they don't want to be public with the fact that they're not going to vote for Trump. I think that people are scared and they don't want to lead with it, so they're just nodding and winking. And then when they go in the ballot box, hopefully they get this, this problem for their party out.
Yeah, I think and we do find ourselves in just a strange situation in that, we have supposedly a triangulation of power, right? But right now, one part is threatened, and I know that it's driving Roberts crazy, even though he did not participate in the call for recusal of these justices, probably because he knew it wouldn't happen, But I do think that with all this conversation, there's a positive part to it too, and it makes me feel good. So on a lighter note, we mentioned race relations. I love Caitlin Clark. If you didn't see this, she got fouled by another player in the WNBA. It was African-American woman. Most of the players in the NBA and WNBA are African-American. And Caitlin Clark, as we all know, who came in from Iowa and broke all these college records, has come into the WNBA, and she's going to be a legitimate player in the WNBA. But this happened, and so many people rush to make it a racist thing, and I'm just trying to tell people it's not.
Mabry doubled off to Carter. Her jumper is good. Kennedy Carter now with 12 points off the bench.
It was still BS move, and she got a technical foul, and she's not apologizing for it. It's a physical athletic game, and the idea that women that play this have to somehow have their little teacup.
Oh, exactly. They have to be so dainty.
Right.
Passions run high. You're playing a professional sports game. If that was a group of men, the conversation would be completely different.
Well, and the Fever's attendance in 5 games exceeded what it did the entire season before. Wow. 20 games. So I mean, and the athletes in the WNBA, sure, I'd be a little jealous too. This kid walks off the street.
Oh, I mean, I in a way, I guess ego-wise, but as a player, the attention she's bringing to this sport is going to help everybody. Once you get those eyes and those television ratings, money comes in your pocket. It doesn't matter that you're not Caitlin Clark. You know
Right.
what I mean? If people get excited about it, it's the same thing with soccer. You know, people watch women's sports, and that's becoming more and more true.
You know, I mean, without a doubt. I mean, tennis has always been highly viewed. You know, over the years. Soccer after the Women's Cup of about 20 years ago. You know, what was when Brandy, who took off her shirt,
Chastain,
Brandy,
Brandy,
that moment. That I love watching soccer, and I love watching women's soccer even more. And women's basketball, if you are a purist, they play the game the way it's supposed to be played. They pass it, they move without the ball. It's a much different game than the NBA. And fast pitch softball, my son and I watch it all the time and we love it, so I guess we find ourselves, right now, and moving forward this summer. Can't believe it's almost summer, right? Yeah,
I know, feels like it here.
Yeah, I bet it does. Yeah, well, you're in the Bay Area, and
Yep.
and I'm down in San Diego, and it's here in California. I often feel like when I do these shows with people from around the country. One of my guests he lives in Spain, or he's in Vietnam. He travels everywhere,
Right.
and he's African American, and people find out he's American, and they're bewildered, as to how we can be in such disarray considering everything we have.
Yeah.
And that's the question.
We're blowing it. We need to get it back together. That's what we need to do.
Totally agree. All right, we can find your show where?
That Nikki Medoro Show on YouTube. It also airs live on Facebook, Instagram, X, all of those.
And of course, this show drops on Friday, and appreciate you watching this. Coming up, and I really do want to get somebody on that can talk a little bit more about algorithms and explain how this works. And also, have you ever done this? Have you ever been driving down the road and you were talking at home with James or something about shoes or something, and you get an ad?
Yes, all the time.
Wendy says the phone is listening to her, and I say, no, it's not.
No, you just Googled something or something. I know you're going to laugh at me right now. You know what I'm seeing ads for? Readers. I'm going blind, my friend. I'm going, and it sucks so bad. It really does. But yeah, that's all I keep seeing everywhere. Readers, you want these? I'm like, Jesus, Lord Almighty.
We've known each other 10 years. And when I first met you, and you still are young, but when I first met you, it was like, I could tell you were still living the 20s vibe,
Well, my eyes aren't anymore, unfortunately. They're going, they're getting shot, but whatever. It's fine.
All right. Well, we're going to out of here. Again, What's Franklin? Find us on Really American platform on YouTube. And also the sound from this you can get to when you go to iTunes and or Spotify. That is Nikki Medoro. Again, find her show, the Nikki Medoro Show, Medoro. I always screwed that up,
Very
right?
Good. Very good.
I know. All right. Till next time, we'll see you. See you, Nick.
Okay, bye.